I'm Mahima Banthia and welcome back. And I'm again here to teach you some microeconomics, consumer behavior. And we are doing Mankiw chapter 21, which is the theory of consumer choice. So you can see the previous videos for budget lines and indifference curves and substitution effect and income effect. And today I'm going to take over from there. And I'm going to start with talking about the demand curve and given goods and some more topics. So let's start. All right. So since we've already derived the substitution effect and income effect, we know that the total of the two is price effect. And price effect means when the price of a good changes, the quantity demanded of that good responds. So when price, let's say, falls, the quantity demand is going to increase. And this increase can be bifurcated into the substitution effect and income effect. Right? Now, one thing to mention is that the substitution effect is always negative. Right? Which means that if price increases, then you will substitute your demand for the other good. So let's say the price of Coke increases, you will change the demand from Coke to Pepsi. So you will also, when price increases, because of the substitution effect, you will always choose the other good, right? You will always shift your demand away when price increases. And when price falls, you will always shift your demand towards the good. So there's a negative relation between price and quantity. When price increases, quantity falls. When price falls, quantity rises. So substitution effect is always negative. Income effect, on the other hand, can be positive or negative, right? Income effect is positive for normal goods, as we discussed earlier. It is negative for inferior goods, right? The sum of the two is the price effect. Price effect is the sum of substitution effect plus income effect, right? Now, if the goods are normal, then let's say as price falls, X increases. And when price falls, real income rises. So the demand for X rises. So when price falls, both the effects add on and we have net increase in quantity, right? That's what we are going to see here, that when price was 2, the quantity demanded for fish was 1. When price was 4, the quantity demanded for fish was 150. When the price falls to 2, we see that the quantity demanded of fish increases to 350, right? Now, if we take the same information and we plot it in the price and quantity space. So in this case, this was quantity of fish on the x-axis and quantity of mangoes on the y-axis. If we change that into this graph being only for fish, so price of fish on the x-axis and quantity of fish on the y-axis, what we get is a nice price and quantity relation. And we see that as price falls, quantity demanded definitely rises. This can be used to derive the demand curve of fish. So the law of demand says as price increases, quantity falls. As quantity increases, as price increases, quantity falls. As price falls, quantity increases. That's the general law of demand. And you can use that using our indifference curve analysis, using the price change. We can derive the law of demand. We can derive the downward sloping demand curve. So in this case, we see that this is the downward sloping demand curve for fish. Now, when we derive the demand curve, we find that not all goods have a downward sloping demand curve. Now, of course, you may ask why, how is it possible for goods to not have a downward sloping demand curve? Is it even possible? Aren't all goods supposed to have a downward sloping demand curve? Well, there are exceptions to everything. So let's kind of understand how we get a non-downward sloping demand curve. Let's revisit this equation of price effect bifurcated into substitution effect plus income effect that I wrote on the side. So for normal goods, and let's take a case of price falls. When price falls, substitution effect is negative, which means that when price falls, quantity of good X rises. Then when price falls, the real income rises, and which leads to if a good is normal, when income rises, quantity demanded of X will rise. When we add the two up, we get price effect, which means that when price falls, the quantity of good X rises, right? This is a classic normal good. Then we had also discussed a case of inferior good. Inferior good was where the substitution effect is negative. And like I said, the substitution effect is going to be negative for all the goods. Okay, so all the goods that I draw, substitution effect is always going to be negative. So let's consider inferior goods. So as price falls, because of the substitution effect, X will rise. Okay, substitution effect is negative. But what about income effect? For inferior goods, if you remember, income effect is negative. That means when price falls and the real income rises, the quantity of X actually falls. Okay, so income effect is actually negative for inferior goods. Now, what happens is that when X rises because of substitution effect and X falls because of income effect, two things can happen. Either the strength of the substitution effect can be stronger. If the strength of the substitution effect is stronger, the net result is that quantity of X increases. Of course, it will be less than what it was here. So if let's say substitution effect was 10, income effect was 5, so total here was 15. If substitution effect was 10 and income effect was 5, the total here is only 5. So the increase in X is much lower in case of inferior goods than normal goods, right? So that is something that we can keep in mind. But ultimately for inferior goods, X does increase. When price falls, X does fall. So for the normal good, we have the law of demand works. The demand curve is downward sloping. For inferior goods, also the law of demand works. When price falls, X rises. The quantum is less, but it is still there. So for inferior goods, the strength of substitution effect is more than the strength of income effect. They are both taking X in opposite directions, but the strength of the substitution effect is larger. So it pulls the quantity of X in its direction, which is increase. So inferior goods have a property that not only is income effect negative, but the price effect is also negative, which means when P falls, X rises, and when P rises, X falls. So law of demand holds. Okay, so that is something that we can kind of remember, that for inferior goods, law of demand holds. That means there are some set of goods for which the strength of the substitution effect will be lesser than the strength of the income effect, which means that X increases because of the substitution effect. When price falls, X rises, but X rises by less. When price falls, income rises, but it is an inferior good, which means that when income rises, quantity of X falls, but the strength of the substitution effect is now larger. So the quantity of X falls by 10. So in the net, the strength of the income effect is larger than the strength of the substitution effect. And when price falls, quantity demanded actually falls. So law of demand does not hold. Okay, so for this category of goods, so this is also an inferior good subcategory, because the definition of inferior good, which is when income rises, X falls, that still is there. So when income rises, X is falling. So it is an inferior good, but it is a special type of inferior good where the law of demand also does not hold. Such goods are called Giffen goods. So what is the special definition of Giffen goods? Let's note that down. Giffen goods are those goods for which this Giffen goods are a subset of inferior goods. So they are a subset of inferior goods for which the law of demand does not hold. Right? It is that given goods are that subset of inferior goods for which the law of demand does not hold. Which means for given goods, when price rises, quantity demanded actually rises. And when price falls, quantity demanded actually falls. Okay. So a lot of some of the necessity goods fall in this category. Some of the luxury goods fall in this category. For luxury goods, if the price rises, the demand actually rises. And when price falls, the demand actually falls. So some goods do not obey the law of demand, and given goods are those. And let's go back to understanding more about given goods. So for given goods, do all goods obey law of demand? No. So substitution effect, income effect. If income effect is stronger than substitution effect, then the goods are given goods. A good for which an increase in price raises the quantity demanded. So here is an example from using ICs for given goods. So for example, this is the quantity of potatoes and meat which is bought. When price rises, so here we are having that the prices of potatoes have risen. The prices of potato have risen, but the equilibrium is now on a lower IC. But on that lower IC, we see that the quantity of potatoes is larger than before. Okay, the quantity of meat has fallen, but the quantity of potatoes is actually larger than before. So potatoes are a given good, that when prices of potatoes have risen, the quantity demanded of potatoes have actually risen. Also being because potatoes are a necessity good. So let's say if you are buying, the price of potatoes have risen, so you don't really have the money to buy meat. So you just end up consuming a little more of potatoes and that's it. So that kind of how it works. So if we use this to in the price and the quantity space, so we'll see that when the price of potatoes was, let's say, P0, the quantity was Q0. But when the price of potatoes have risen to P1, the quantity has risen to Q1. So the demand curve is actually upward sloping. So this is violating the law of demand. Okay. And which goods violate the law of demand? It's the given goods. And to reiterate why, because the strength of the income effect, so they are a subset of inferior goods for which the strength of the income effect is stronger than the strength of the substitution effect. All right. So these are called given goods. All right. Now from here, let's move on to an application of this income effect and substitution effect that we have written, which is how to derive the labor supply curve for a consumer. Now, we all know that it is people who are laborers. So people like you and me, we are not just consumers. That's one part. But to be consumers, we have to work. And in our work life, we are laborers. And we have to choose, we have to decide how much to work. This is not slavery, right? So this is not forced labor. We have to decide how much do we work, how much do we rest, and how much do we consume. That is our choice. So as a person, as an individual, there is a choice. There are two choices. The choice is between two goods that we like. One good that we like is consumption. We all love consuming. We all love consuming goods. The more we consume, the better it is. The more types of variety of goods we like. But to consume more, there is a downside. We have to work more. And if we have to work more, then we have to sacrifice something that we also like, which is leisure. Leisure is free time, relaxation time, time to watch Netflix, time to scroll through Instagram or YouTube, right? So these are two good goods. So consumption and leisure are two good goods. Okay, two goods which the consumer likes. but there is a trade-off between the two. If you have more leisure, then probably you can work less. And if you work less, then probably you're going to consume less. So usually for most people, there is a trade-off between leisure and consumption. The less you work, the less you consume. The more you work, the more you consume. So there are two goods that you like, but you can't have more of both of them all the time unless your wage rate rises. So we are just going to discuss that. So how does a consumer decide how much to consume, how much to relax, and how much to work? So the consumer decides how to spend their time between leisure and working. The relative price of leisure is the amount of consumption she would buy with an hour's wages. So we are just going to discuss that. Let us kind of try to understand what is the budget line of a consumer. So for a consumer, or for an individual, there are, like I said, the utility function of an individual is across two goods. It's across consumption and it's across leisure, where C stands for consumption, L stands for leisure. So a choice for the consumer is between these two goods. His utility function is defined between these two goods. If we assume like a standard Cobb-Douglas utility function, the utility function would be, let's say, C into L, or C to the power half, L to the power half. It could be U is equal to log C plus log L. So anything. So these are the two goods that he likes. Now we have to form the budget constraint. What's the constraint? If he likes two goods, what's the problem? The problem is that the consumption can only be had, our consumption in this model is going to be equal to something called your earnings. You can only consume as much as you earn. And what do you earn? You earn your wage rate multiplied by L. So W stands for your wage rate and L stands for labor hours. Okay. We can also put a price here. So P into C is the total money that you spend or consumption. That has to be equal to W into L. That is what you earn. So what you earn is what you spend. So your budget, the constraint of the consumer is PC is equal to WL. How much you work is how much you can spend, right? Now, labor hours and leisure hours are related. How are they related? Leisure plus labor has to be equal to 24 hours. So you have 24 hours in a day. You can spend it either on leisure or on labor. Since my utility function is defined over C and L, I'm going to replace this L with this capital L. So PC is going to be equal to W into 24 minus L. If I open this up, I get PC is equal to 24 W minus WL. If I take this to the other side, I get PC plus WL is equal to 24W. Now this is the constraint faced by a consumer. The price of consumption is P. The price of leisure is the foregone wage rate. So if you consume leisure, the price that you pay is that you don't earn wages. So that is the price of leisure. So PC plus WL is equal to 24W. 24W is the maximum it's the maximum earnings possible for you if you work for 24 hours. So out of your working for 24 hours, you can divide it between working, which will give you PC, or leisure, which is cost is W, capital L. So for a consumer, the proposition to maximize is to maximize his utility, which is defined over C and L, some function of C comma L, subject to this budget line, which is PC plus WL is equal to 24W, right? So this actually will give us like a standard if you, like I said, if we have like a standard, this is a standard budget line. We can have L here and we can have C here. So Px by Py is the slope of the budget line, which is going to be minus W by P. That's the slope, real wage rate. This is the real wage rate. That's the slope of the budget line. And this is going to be the utility function of a consumer. So this is what we have. This is how we can define as the equilibrium for an individual who chooses this much C star and this much leisure. So this is an individual who chooses, this is the amount of C star and this is the amount of L star that I should consume depending on my utility function and my budget line. If something changes, if his utility function changes, if P changes, W changes, or if things change, then there will be a change in the consumer's behavior. So now let's see a little bit more on that. All right, so let's see this formally. So like I said, we'll have normal downward sloping ICs across consumption and leisure. We'll have our budget line with the slope of minus W by P, and the optimum is where MRS is equal, which is the slope of the IC is equal to the real wage rate, which is going to be the point of equilibrium. But what if something changes? What if wage rate increases? Then what? When wage rate increases, that's like price change. It has two effects. There's a substitution effect, which means that, let's say, if your wage increases, what is the substitution effect? When wage increases, you will definitely want to work more. Why? Because you're getting more. When wage increases, you have an incentive to work more, right? Because you're getting paid more per hour of your work. Okay, so a higher wage kind of makes leisure more expensive. Okay, so because that's the opportunity cost of leisure. So more is the wages, leisure is more and more expensive. So the person may choose less leisure because its incentive to work more has increased. So it increases the quantity of labor supplied. So more wages should motivate you to work more. Okay, so more wages should motivate you to work more and relax less, have less of leisure. But that's not the only effect. If, let's say, I start with an income of, let's say, 5,000 rupees a month, you increase my wages to 15,000, I'll be very happy to work more. You increase my wages to 20,000, 25,000, 30,000, 50,000, 1 lakh, 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs, I'll be happy to work more. But there will come a point, let's say you increase my wages to 5 lakhs a month, 6 lakhs a month. Then I will feel, okay, why do I need to work so hard? Can't I work a little less and still enjoy my life? So there's a point which is called the income effect. With higher wage rate, you are richer. Every hour you work, you get paid more. So you might want to buy, because you're richer, you want to buy all the goods which are normal. Leisure is also a normal good. Consumption is a normal good. So with a rise in wages, when your real income rises, you want to consume more of leisure. So because of income effect, there's a tendency of increasing leisure. Because of substitution effect, there's a tendency of reducing leisure. So what do? Again, what happens when wage increases depends on the strength. Usually what happens is when your wages are low and there's an increase in wages, the strength of substitution effect is stronger than the strength of income effect. So when wage increases, leisure actually falls and labor hours rise. As your wages keep on increasing, then the strength of the income effect, it overtakes the strength of substitution effect. And when wages increase, leisure actually rises and labor actually falls. So both of these will give us a different labor supply curve. So let's see what is the labor supply curve. So here what we have is we have consumption and leisure. Let's hold on for a minute. So here you see that this is giving us on the right-hand side graph, we are drawing wages and we are drawing hours of labor supplied. Wages and labor supplied gives us what we call the labor supply curve. Okay. So when initially blue was the equilibrium between consumption and leisure, this was the equilibrium. So the amount of leisure tells me what is the amount of labor. 24 minus leisure is labor. So initially this was the wages and this was the leisure. This was the labor. Okay. Then when wages increased, you could, why it is shown by this red line? Because when wage increases, the hours of leisure can be 24 only. So you can't increase the hours of leisure. But if you work more, you can have more consumption in the same 24 hours. So this is how, when wages increase, it's minus W by P, right? So the wage line becomes steeper, but this point does not increase. The leisure hours remain, the maximum leisure hours remain maximum at 24, but the consumption increases. You can consume more. Now, if the strength, when wage increases, if the strength of the substitution effect is larger, then when wages increase, you will reduce your leisure hours. Okay, you will reduce your leisure hours, which means you will, when wages increase to W1, you will increase your labor hours. So if the strength of the substitution effect is stronger than the strength of the income effect, when wages increase, this is how the IC will shift to point B, where consumption is higher, but leisure is lesser. Okay. So labor supply curve in that, at that time is positively sloped. Okay. And like I said, this happens when wages are usually lower. But if I consider the opposite case, so this is for substitution effect is more than income effect. If I create the opposite case, so this is the initial point, wage rises, but you start increasing your leisure. So you increase your leisure, that means you reduce your labor, right? So when you reduce, when wage rate increases, if you reduce your labor hours and increase your leisure hours and reduce your labor hours, your labor supply curve is downward sloping, right? So in this case, the strength of income effect is larger. Because you are richer, you want to work less. And in that case, my labor supply curve is downward slope. So we can use our concepts of ICs. We can use our concepts of substitution and income effect to derive the demand curve for normal goods, given goods, to derive the labor supply curve. So this is downward sloping and upward sloping, two types. So we can do so much with this one concept of income and substitution effect. Also, we defined what given goods are. So I hope you all enjoyed today's class and watch out for the next video where we are going to understand how a consumer's decisions of consumption and saving is also can be derived using these concepts. So thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to the EduSure channel and I'll see you again. Bye-bye.